The Sisters of Battle. There are no more devout warriors to the God Emperor of mankind than the orders of the Adepta Sororitas. To witness their wars of faith as an ally is to be awestruck with the force of their belief. Deafening peals of battle psalms ring out, blaring from consecrated emitters and shouted from the lips of these zealous, holy soldiers. Angelic hosts descend on columns of holy fire, as warriors equipped with winged jump packs deliver the Emperor's judgment to the craven, no matter where they hide. Their elaborately crafted war gear and archaic tanks are illuminated with the sacred writings of saints and anointed with holy unguents. The Battle Sisters of the Adepta Sororitas bear the holy weaponry with which the Emperor's legions conquered the galaxy, and illuminate the faithless in lethal volleys from the holy trinity of bolter, flamer, and melter weapons. It is said, the Emperor's benediction touches each of these warriors, manifesting as a nimbus of holy light in which his power is revealed in miraculous deeds of fortitude and divine strength. To face such righteous faith and holy ire is to face the conviction of belief itself. From blasphemers, heretics, and mutant strains to Xenos breeds, idolaters, and iconoclasts, all cower before the judgment of the God Emperor and his Sisters of Battle. The Imperial Creed. To humanity, the master of mankind is a deity, the God Emperor. He is the source of their strength, their defense against abomination, and the deserving object of their adoration and loyalty. The galaxy-spanning religion that surrounds the worship of the Emperor is known as the Imperial Creed, its rites overseen by the ecclesiarchy's priesthood and its doctrines enforced by the Adepta Sororitas. Amongst the untold billions that populate the Imperium's planets, the Imperial Creed is the official religion, from the teeming slums of hive worlds to the noble spires that rise over civilized worlds, on isolated frontier planets, and aboard the countless ships that ply stable warp routes between them. The Emperor is deified and worshipped every day. Offerings are made to him in praise, in tithe, and in blood, through the endless wars fought in his name. It is the ecclesiarchy that provides the structure through which these offerings are demanded. Known formally as the Adeptus Ministorum, the ecclesiarchy raise ostentatious temples and meagre chapels, giant cathedrals that accommodate thousands, and shrines that house saintly relics, drawing pilgrims from many sectors away. The ecclesiarchy's complex hierarchies of cardinals, missionaries, preachers, and zealous laity, under the overall leadership of the ecclesiarch on holy terror, ensure the prescribed prayers and invocations are made, and teach the masses to guard against heresy and deviancy. These priests are tasked with maintaining and spreading the faith of the Imperium, converting the denizens of rediscovered worlds, and giving sermons to warn against laxity of vigilance. What would grow into the ecclesiarchy began as one of a desperate group of religious cults when the Emperor still walked amongst his subjects, their illicit worship fermenting in secret. In the wake of the Horus Heresy, when it became known that the Emperor had crushed the arch-traitor Horus and ascended to the Golden Throne, he was openly worshipped on hundreds of worlds. The nascent ecclesiarchy crushed or absorbed their rivals over many centuries, spreading to every strata of imperial life before their recognition in M32 as the Imperium's official religious authority. Now their influence and power is nigh on inescapable. From workers in munitorum complexes and sump-dwelling gangs, to cloistered bureaucratic scribes and guardsmen fighting on the front lines, almost all of humanity is ingrained with the concept of the Emperor's divinity. They know the sweat and sacrifice needed to honor it, and fear more than anything the vengeful punishment for not meeting such requirements. The ecclesiarchy's priests keep a close watch on their congregations, ever alert to the seeds of heresy. Witchcraft and mutation are rooted out, and whole populations are whipped into a frenzied zealotry, incited to turn on anyone suspected of consorting with Xenos or demons. The Adeptus Ministorum has the authority to seize, painfully interrogate, and execute those it suspects of crimes against the Imperial Creed, often in the most horrific and public of manners. Some heresies, however, run far deeper than individual blasphemies, and isolated cells of impure cults. When widespread deviancy rears its head, when idolaters amass in armed rebellion or the ecclesiarchy's sacred holdings are under threat, the Adepta Sororitas are unleashed in a storm of righteous fire. They stand as the Adeptus Ministorum's enforcers and its most zealous defenders. Commonly known as the Sisters of Battle, the Adepta Sororitas are the spiritual descendants of a warrior sect known as the Daughters of the Emperor. Rather than be disbanded upon their discovery by the ecclesiarchy, as most such sects are, their incredible skill and utmost dedication to the God Emperor were viewed as useful assets. During the reign of the then ecclesiarch, the notorious Gog Vandire, they rose to become the Adeptus Ministorum's elite holy warriors, under the leadership of their founding matriarchs. The Adepta Sororitas are upheld as the most pious of the Imperial Creed's adherents, fighting in its name to eradicate any who threaten the impurity of mankind. They comprise a number of strict ascetic orders, the most numerous and conspicuous of which are the Orders Militant, which form the Adeptus Ministorum's military strength. They project the ecclesiarchy's power throughout the Imperium, from the halls of the ecclesiarchy palace on Terra to blood-soaked battlefields on countless worlds. The Adepta Sororitas' primary charge is to wage wars of faith against those whose very existence is a danger to the Imperium: the wretched heretic, the unsanctioned psyker, and the abominable mutant. Yet they also fight to purge the galaxy of the hated Xenos, driving back any creatures that dare taint the God Emperor's realm. The Sisters of Battle carry out the annihilation of those whose faithlessness has placed them beyond hope of redemption, and they do so as a sacred duty. The act of fighting in defense of their faith against the foul heretics that would tear it down is itself deemed a hallowed honor. When not at war, they spend much of their time in prayer to the saints of the Imperium for guidance. These acts of worship carry over into their righteous combat drills, periods of fasting and moments of reflection on the deeds of their founders, ensuring that their physical conditioning goes hand in hand with their spiritual fortitude. Forgiveness breeds laxity, and mercy is what the weak offer. You have sinned against the God Emperor. Prepare to offer your penance in the only meaningful way possible, through pain and through sacrifice. The Matriarchs. Imperial history has known thousands of saints, many of whom were martial exemplars in life and worshipped by those who continued to purge the Imperium. The Adepta Sororitas revere 6 saints before all others, for these were the Matriarchs, warriors all. They fought for their faith at the Sisterhood's very founding, during an era of faithlessness. When the Adeptus Ministorum was established as the Imperium's official religion, records from the Imperial Palace show that the ecclesiarchy sought to consolidate its hold by outlawing and dismantling the other emperor-worshipping cults. With its growing wealth, the armies at its disposal were enormous, and the ecclesiarch's position became so powerful that he and his successors became High Lords of Terra. In M36, the ecclesiarch Gog Vandire usurped the position of High Lord of the Administratum as well. Through bribery, assassination, and coercion, Vandire was afforded unprecedented authority. With it, according to the Hagiographia Primus, he sought to bring the Imperium under his heel, but those who opposed his tyranny grew in number. Thus flourished a time of terror, lasting for decades, during which billions died, whole planets burned, and faith itself wavered under Van Dyer's despotic regime. The histories refer to this period as the Reign of Blood. Editor's note. For a far more extensive exploration of the creation of the ecclesiarchy from its founding, and the Reign of Blood itself, and also Van Dyer, I direct you to the comments section of this Voxcast, to another Voxcast, which delves into this, the history of the Imperial Church. Now we continue, focusing ourselves primarily on the Sisters of Battle. The original Daughters of the Emperor were discovered on the little-known agri-world of Saint-Loire, at the height of the Reign of Blood. They were a small and isolated cult of a few hundred sisters, devoted to worshipping the Emperor and maintaining an inner purity. The Daughters studied ancient arts of war, clearing their minds of worldly considerations in order to hone their battle skills. Illuminated biographies by Van Dyer's scribes described the way in which the ecclesiarch honoured Saint-Loire with an ecclesiastical visit, taking oaths of fealty from the daughters after deceiving them into thinking he held the God Emperor's favour. The Daughters of the Emperor, headed by their leader, Alicia Dominica, were instated as Van Dyer's personal bodyguard. They were his blade of judgment and his tool of vengeance against any slight perceived by his increasingly fragile sanity. Despite his vast forces and the bloody defence offered up by his elite bodyguard, Van Dyer's combined enemies eventually besieged the ecclesiarchal palace on Terra. What transpired next is not recorded fully or consistently. Some sources contend that a number of the Emperor's own guardians, the mysterious Adeptus Custodes, advanced into the ecclesiarchal palace through hidden means and spoke humbly with 6 members of the ecclesiarch's bodyguard. Others suggest that the custodians fiercely declaimed Van Dyer as an enemy of the Emperor. However, all surviving fragments of the encounter, remembered in choral plainsong, electro-tapestries, and illuminated scripts, agree on its outcome. Unable to sway the 6 devout bodyguards to abandon the insane ecclesiarch, the custodians led them through the uncharted ways to the most sacred place on Terra, the chambers of the Golden Throne itself. Alicia Dominica and her sisters Catherine, Lucia, Mina, Silvana, and Arabella entered the chambers alone. None alive now, save the God Emperor himself, know what was imparted to them. Yet when they returned to Van Dyer's side, Alicia denounced the High Lord's corruption to her order. Surrounded by her 5 senior warriors, she beheaded the mad priest with one fell blow of her blade. With Van Dyer's death, the Reign of Blood ended. His successor as ecclesiarch, Sebastian Thor, adopted a catalogue of demands for the limiting of the Ministerum's power. High on this list was the Decree Passive, which forbade the ecclesiarchy from maintaining the standing armies and ships accrued under Van Dyer's rule. Thor argued that the Daughters of the Emperor fell outside the decree's remit, and that now, more than ever, they were needed to defend the faith, rather than any ecclesiarch's ambition. Alicia Dominica, as military and spiritual head of her sisters, oversaw the reformation of the Daughters of the Emperor into the Adepta Sororitas. To ensure no future ecclesiarch would have unrestrained power over its entire armed might, she saw her sisterhood divided, first into 2 convents, and later into the earliest orders militant. Dominica and her senior sisters, those who had passed into the chambers of the Golden Throne, each went on to be named matriarch and patron of one of the 6 founding orders majoris. Millennia after their deaths, they are revered as exemplar saints and angelic intercessors with the divine God Emperor. Shrines at their battle sites are tended with solemnity, and statues are raised to exalt their legendary deeds. Many of the Imperium's common citizenry pray for their beneficence, and sisters invoke their names on the field of battle. Saint Dominica, Spirit of Holy Wrath. Saint Catherine, the Martyr, the Shield-bearer. Saint Lucia, Endurant of the Passion. Saint Mina, the Bloody, Dominica's Champion. Saint Silvana, the Spirit of Intercession. And Saint Arabella, the Liberator from Doubt. These warriors stood in the presence of the God Emperor, and in death they watch over the worthy who fight in his name. Wars of Faith. Since their inception, the Adepta Sororitas have bolstered their ranks to the point that their presence is now felt far across the Imperium. No longer the Ecclesiarch's bodyguard, they are an active and crusading military force, crushing the enemies of the Imperial Creed wherever they fester, and illuminating the Emperor's realm as a beacon of faith. When humanity is faced with a substantial threat, it falls to the High Lords of Terror to order a crusade against mankind's enemies. Such crusades are enormous military operations that mobilize multiple branches of the Imperium's colossal war machine, including Space Marine chapters, Astra Militarum regiments, Navis Imperialis fleets, as well as forces of the Adeptus Ministorum. But the Ecclesiarch also has the individual authority to issue calls to battle when the sanctity of the Imperial Creed is imperiled. Such large-scale mobilizations are known as Wars of Faith. When a War of Faith is declared, those Sororitas orders able to respond send their finest troops to obliterate the heretics and sinners marked for death by the Ecclesiarch. Fleets of Ministorum vessels descend upon the planet, system, or sector that has been targeted, ferrying Sisters of Battle and non-militant adjutants by the thousand into the war zone. Yet it is not only the Sororitas who answer the call to war. Other servants of the Ministorum join themselves to the Sisters' commanderies. Missionaries who have spent decades spreading the Imperial Creed to the inhabitants of a rediscovered world will instantly turn their ire on the populace if a War of Faith is declared. Operating with small contingents of hand-picked warriors and Frataris militia, these missionaries are more than happy to combine their purgatorial efforts with those of the incoming Adepta Sororitas. Similarly, preachers who have been operating in nearby systems gather all manner of zealous recruits to their cause. The most impassioned cults of the Imperial Creed are roused to action, and through tearful prayers, their members beseech the Emperor for the chance to loose their righteous fury upon the faithless. As one, the massed ranks of believers envelop their enemies, slaughtering and burning those whom the Emperor's light cannot redeem. A War of Faith may last decades or even centuries, and is not considered over until all traces of the heretical enemy is scoured from the galaxy. Since her appointment to the position of Abbess Sanctorum, Morven Val has overseen the unleashing of many more Wars of Faith, as the Imperium re-establishes contact with multiple sectors and systems in the wake of the Great Rift's torturous opening. Tales of demonic incursions, heretical cults, sorcerous mutation, and Xenos infiltration have soared. Abhorring inaction, Val has committed large forces of the Adepta Sororitas to the chain worlds of Kuand and the Ragorsh Straits, and the reconsecration of Malia's tomb, among a host of other sacred campaigns, while also ensuring the Sisters of Battle accompany as many of Guilliman's Indomitus crusades as possible. At her direction, dozens of Orders Militant have dispatched forces to embattled and stalled Wars of Faith as the Abbess seeks to bring them to swift conclusions and ensure her armies are ever on the advance. Val has also assigned crusades to seek ways across the Great Rift and the dark wells of silence that grow even within the Imperium Sanctus, to investigate the fate of Adepta Sororitas forces whose every trace seems to have vanished. She intends for St. Dworsman's Traverse, the Nachmun Gauntlet, and the Shield Worlds of Baal and the Pariah Nexus to all ring to the shouted prayers of the Adepta Sororitas, reigniting the beacons of the Imperium's faith. The Ordo Hereticus. At the end of the Age of Apostasy, the Inquisition formed a secret order within its ranks to watch the ecclesiarchy more closely. While the Inquisition as a whole monitors every aspect of the Imperium, the Ordo Hereticus is primarily concerned with stamping out aberrant faith before it is allowed to run rampant. Though the ecclesiarchy regulates itself and its followers closely, primarily through the Adepta Sororitas, the Ordo Hereticus provides another line of defense to ensure that those in power within the ecclesiarchy do not abuse their positions to such an extent that they threaten the stability of the Imperium. These inquisitors watch wars of faith closely to make certain that the objectives laid down by the ecclesiarch are both justified and not exceeded by those actually fighting. They also monitor the temporary armies known as the Frataris Militia that rally behind members of the priesthood in theatres of conflict, ensuring that such forces are disbanded after they are needed. In this way, the Ordo Hereticus ensures that the ecclesiarchy's standing military does not reach the level it did under Gog Van Dyer. Ecclesiarchy Battle Conclaves. Though the decree passive prohibits the ecclesiarchy from maintaining their standing armies of men under arms, it does not prevent the priests of the Ministorum from assembling their own battle-hardened retinues. Small in number, yet deadly combatants, these inveterate warriors dedicate themselves body and soul to serving the imperial creed. Pious warrior knights, chosen for their martial skill and utter devotion to the imperial creed. Crusaders act as the bodyguards and champions of the Ministorum priesthood. They are often seen fighting alongside the Adepta Sororitas in their wars of faith, spilling the blood of heretics and witchkin, with great sweeps of their heavy broadswords, bullets and blades deflecting harmlessly from their large, powered shields. Across the wide span of the galaxy, there exist numerous cults and minor creeds that worship death. Many of these are heretical religions, but some are fully devoted to the imperial creed. Their adherents offer up the corpses of slaughtered foes as repayment for the great debt that humanity owes the almighty God Emperor. The death cult assassins that hail from these aggressive cults are prized as companions by the Ministorum priests. Often wielding ritual blades blessed by cult leaders, they have devoted their violent lives to the mastery of armed combat, and train their athletic bodies to be capable of great feats of speed and skill. Archoflagellants lope alongside faithful armies in packs, their lash-like limbs whipping back and forth. Archoflagellation is but one method employed by the Adepta Ministorum to punish heretical thought and action. Subjected to agonizing spiritual cleansing and physical modification, those sentenced to this fate are fitted with cybernetic augmentations and subdermal stim injectors. Their pacifier helms subdue their abused psyche with floods of sacred sensory input. When battle is joined, their priestly masters utter a trigger word that deactivates the helm and pumps a cocktail of chemicals through the archoflagellant, sending them into a frenzy. Pain suppressors also wash through their system, rendering them insensate to the foe's desperate blows. Penitent engines are another grisly reminder of the power wielded by the ecclesiarchy and the dangers of drawing its ire. Those convicted of heinous crimes against the faith are wired into the machine's torturous innards. Its pain amplifiers and neural injectors torment their bodies, their agony driving the clanking engines into the foe. Heedless of danger, they lay about the enemy with gigantic blades and gouts of holy fire, seeking absolution in death, whether theirs or their enemies. The Order's Militant. The Adepta Sororitas is necessarily sprawling in size and structure. Their ranks comprise multiple orders scattered across the galaxy, allowing them to combat threats to the faith wherever they arise. It is the holy duty of the Order's militant to expurgate such dangers through vehement faith and the destructive power of their sacred weapons. The Order's militant are the most widely known orders of the Adepta Sororitas, their members commonly known as the Sisters of Battle. Warriors all, each one dedicates themselves to achieving purity of spirit through martial perfection, and follows the most stringent training regimes and doctrines. The number of sisters comprised by the Order's militant pales in comparison to the sheer scale of the soldiery wielded by the Astra Militarum, but the Adepta Sororitas boast a degree of elite martial prowess that is almost unmatched amongst the Imperial Guard. The nominal and ceremonial headquarters of each order lies within the fortified shrine complex of their parent convent, together known as the Great Convents. Each one is a gargantuan physical edifice and represents the senior tier of the organizational hierarchy. The convent sanctorum lies on Ophelia 7, the oldest of the cardinal worlds, while the convent prioris was built within the ecclesiarchal palace upon Holy Terror. Beyond the great convents, each of the Order's militant oversees a parish within the wider Imperium, throughout which their presence is established via fortified sanctuaries. The oldest of these parishes are ancient, and many cover immense areas of space. Yet, wars of faith do not stop at a parish's boundary, while there are heretics still to burn and idolaters to root out. Most orders spread the illumination of the God Emperor to worlds far beyond their primary sanctuaries, establishing far-flung missions and subsidiary chapels to extend the influence of their order and the ecclesiarchy. The weapons, war machines, and exquisitely crafted battle gear of the Order's militant are supplied to the ecclesiarchy by the tech priests of Mars. Under a millennia-old treaty known as the Writ Illuminat, the Adeptus Mechanicus ensure that the elite warriors of the ecclesiarchy are armed in perpetuity. Reaffirmed by each successive ecclesiarch, the Writ Illuminat symbolizes the communion between the Adepta Sororitas and the tech priests of the machine cult, and by its sacred words do the sisters know the adepts of Mars to be loyal servants of the God Emperor, despite their unconventional devotions. Every piece of war gear supplied to the Adepta Sororitas is first taken to the convent prioris, or the convent sanctorum. There they are blessed by the choirs of novitiates in rites that can last for days or even weeks. The Order's weapons, such as the Godwin Diaz pattern bolter, are daubed in sacred oils and polished with cloths touched by saints. Every bolt and chainsword tooth is inscribed with verses from the Fide Imperialis, the battle hymn of the Adepta Sororitas, to ensure that its path is true. The hulls of fearsome battle tanks and the ceramite plating of sculpted power armor are adorned with the Order's traditional colors and illuminated with script from devotional books of prayer, while the armor worn by Sisters of Battle forgoes those auxiliary systems that require a Space Marine's genetically enhanced physiology to function. It still provides the same indomitable degree of protection. A sister will typically make a pilgrimage to the great convent of her order to have her war gear bestowed upon her, and through sacred rituals her soul is bound to her armaments. From that day forth, the sororitas and weapon operate as one to vanquish the enemies of the faith. This is not always a possibility. A sister may need to rearm during an ongoing war, usually by using the weapon of a fallen comrade, to continue fighting. But within each order, it is understood that to use another sister's weapon is a great blessing, for it allows the fallen warrior to fight on, even though her soul has been taken up by the Emperor. Speciality war gear destined to be wielded by a canoness may be sprinkled with blood from the font of martyrs that stands within each convent. before being placed amongst the crypts of fallen saints to lie in repose until it is taken up by its bearer. These are not the only artifacts of war to be revered as relics. Among the holy arsenal of an order militant, paragon war suits are regarded as sacred vestments with a noble will of their own. When war calls the sisters, some of the order's elite Celestians descend into the catacombs beneath their sanctuary. Here lie the mortal remains of saintly warriors. Among them, statuesque war suits stand in individual reliquary chapels that hum with divine power feeds. Each war suit is named, its deeds inscribed on stone tablets lining the chapel. Only the most worthy, in faith and martial skill, are believed to be able to rouse the warrior spirit that pervades each suit. Kneeling in supplicant prayer before it, a Celestian asks for its divine power in the battle to come. Should she be deemed noble enough, the empty suit is said to raise its blade and lay it upon the warrior's shoulder in a miraculous blessing. Thus chosen, the sister embarks within it. The ammunition feeders and fuel lines disengage, and as one, warrior and warsuit stride out to face down whatever heresy has dared show its face. The Order of our Martyred Lady, the Emperor's fiery sword. The fires of vengeance burn brightly in every sister of the Order of our Martyred Lady. They are the deliverers of the God Emperor's holy justice, the dreaded instruments of his will, to whom no sacrifice is too great, and to the clarion call of impassioned prayers, they rain unrelenting destruction upon his enemies. Of all the orders militant, there are none more numerous or more widely spread than the Order of our Martyred Lady. Their name is known by the ruling elites and unwashed masses alike on countless worlds across the galaxy, evoking hope in the righteous and fear amongst the faithless. The Order is renowned for its unrelenting pursuit of those who defy the Emperor by doing harm to his Imperium and its citizens. Xenos marauders, chaos armies, and heretical cults are met with burning fury by the Sisters of our Martyred Lady, who gather wherever the enemy is found to scour them from existence. The Order was one of the first 4 orders militant to be created in the wake of the ecclesiastical reorganization. Originally founded as the Order of the Fiery Heart, its sisters were led by Saint Catherine. Her death during one of the Order's many wars of faith sent waves of anguish throughout the Adepta Sororitas. Channeling their grief, Catherine's own order embarked upon an endless quest for retribution. In honour of their fallen matriarch, they became the Order of our Martyred Lady, and have pursued vengeance against the enemies of their faith ever since. Since the death of their matriarch, the Order of our Martyred Lady has developed a cult of martyrdom that is unparalleled amongst the sisterhood. All sororitas are taught that to die in serving the Emperor is the purest fate his servants can hope for. But amongst the Sisters of our Martyred Lady, this ideal is expressed so fervently that it can appear as though they have a death wish. Isolated battle sisters stand bravely against onrushing hordes of foes, hymns of defiance and reports of bolt guns rising to a simultaneous crescendo. And when the blades of the foe hack into the sisters' flesh, they give their souls willingly up to the God Emperor. Such noble deaths are met with shouts of praise from the slain sisters' comrades, for it is by such unwavering loyalty and faith that the Emperor's gaze is drawn to the battlefield. The Sisters of our Martyred Lady employ tactics that see their formations spread like fire, advancing inexorably as they reduce all who stand before them to ash. Yet their approach to warfare is far from undisciplined. Catherine was a devoted student of military doctrine, and the Order of our Martyred Lady has upheld her teachings. Its sisters are able to switch from one strategy to another with frightening speed and efficacy. The Order of our Martyred Lady holds fortified sanctuaries on many imperial worlds. Some of these sanctuaries operate in relative isolation, existing far beyond the established boundaries of the Order's parish, but the majority are located in the segmentum obscurus. The broad distribution of the Order's preceptories has seen the Sisters of our Martyred Lady engage in many of the Imperium's most grueling war zones. On Armageddon, the Sisters defended the Sanctorum of St. Catherine against the rampaging Ork hordes of the belligerent warlord Gazskull Thraka. Though fully half of their number was martyred, the sheer grit of the Sisters drew Orks from other battlefronts to join the siege. The Order also fought on Cadia during the 13th Black Crusade of Abaddon the Despoiler, their faith and unflinching firepower making the traitors pay in blood for every step they took. Although the Great Rift now divides many of the Order's sanctuaries, the Sisters of our Martyred Lady have not relented in their quest to avenge the Imperium's fallen heroes. They stand dauntless against the Chaos forces that pour from newly opened warp storms, and they march out to annihilate any foe that would prey upon humanity's beleaguered defenders. The fire of their spirit is a sign of hope, that even in this time of horror, the Emperor has not abandoned his faithful servants. Junith Orita? Junith Orita sweeps into battle, wreathed in holy fire, and holding high the mace of castigation. Riding within the pulpit of St. Hollin's Basilica, she hovers across the battlefield upon thrumming waves of holy energy. The pulpit's heavy flamers swivel seemingly of their own accord, seeking out the heretical and the faithless, and immolating them without mercy. As the pyres blaze higher, the Canoness Superior's voice rings out over the furious crackling, at every utterance as sharp and clear as the bells of Ophelia 7. No matter how outnumbered, how bloodied they may be, every true imperial servant who hears her words feels the fires of faith kindle anew in their breast. They surge back into the fight with a prayer on their lips and righteous hatred in their eyes. This is Eurita's greatest gift from the Emperor, this undying flame of absolute belief that leaps to all those around her as though their souls were dry tinder and her words the blazing brand. In this inferno of faith of countless heretics, witches and aliens burned, and by its white heat have manifold imperial victories been forged. From her first days in the Schola Progenium, it was remarked that Junith Eurita exhibited an almost frightening intensity of faith. Orphaned during the Gethysphone massacres, Eurita's traumatic experiences had clearly scarred her. Yet she did not break, but rather focused her rage against mankind's enemies, while cleaving to the absolute belief that the Emperor watched over his people. By the time she joined the ranks of the Order of our Martyred Lady, Eurita was already being watched with keen interest by its then Canoness Superior, Maria Somnation. Eurita's talent for inspirational address, her intensity of faith, a somewhat maniacal fondness for and prodigious skill with flamer weaponry, all had been noted by her drill abbots, and suggested great things to come. Somnation was not disappointed. Sister Eurita took to the role of retributor with fervour, becoming both the inspirational linchpin of her squad and a truly ferocious warrior with her anointed heavy flamer. In the fullness of time, Eurita rose to the position of Celestian, plying her flames of purgation as one of the Canoness Superior's personal bodyguards. In that role, she fought at Somnation's side across the killing fields of Fadoro, through the purge of the Nightmare Hive, and even to the gates of the city of the Poisoned King. Then came Hollin's Hope, and a fateful advance under fierce shelling from the heretical forces of the Iron Warriors. The Sororitas had just secured the blasted shell of St. Hollin's Basilica, when a salvo of missiles crashed down upon it. The vaulted roof collapsed. The tall bastion towers fell. Hundreds of sisters died as the structure caved in, and Somnation was amongst them. It was then that the wounded St. Eurita scaled the stair leading to the miraculously untouched pulpit from which St. Holin had once preached. Fire rained down around her, but neither shot nor shell touched the pulpit as Eureka delivered a blistering address to her surviving sisters. Every eye lit with faith renewed, and with a mighty cry, the order of our martyred lady swept onwards to a costly but decisive victory. Junif Eureka ascended to replace Maria Somnation that day, appointed by the grace of the Emperor himself, and has ridden to war in the blessed pulpit ever since as the true blazing heart of her order. The Order of the Valorious Heart, the Blessed Scourge. Girded by their unshakable faith, the Order of the Valorious Heart perseveres through the most grueling hardships to bring death to the Emperor's enemies. No amount of suffering is too great for them to bear, and all they endure is paid double to their foes. In both their battle tactics and acts of worship, the Sisters of the Valorious Heart adhere to doctrines of stoicism and forbearance. Their practices stem from the teachings of their founder and matriarch, Lucia, who amongst Dominica's companions was said to be a paragon of constancy. She was the level-headed counterpoint to Catherine's burning passion. When the Sisters of the Convent Sanctorum were split, Ecclesiarch Alexis VII wrote that Lucia's Order of the Valorious Heart was to be the immovable anvil to the Fiery Heart's crushing hammer. Yet from their inception, the Valorious Heart were far from a purely defensive force. Led by their matriarch, they aggressively sought worlds upon which the roots of heresy had grown deep, where witchcraft and profane mutation ran rampant, and then set themselves to the task of systematically expunging all traces of faithlessness. The Order willingly plunged itself into protracted battles amidst horrific conditions, laying siege to sorcerous cults on death worlds and storming Xenos planets that were inimical to human existence. Aside from being undeniably effective in grinding away the enemy, these tactics also served as a form of penance. In the oldest manuscripts of Lucia's teachings, recorded during her first address to her order, she explained that the Adepta Sororitas would forevermore carry the burden of atonement for the actions that she and the daughters of the Emperor had taken in supporting the pretender Gorg Vandire. Lucia's martyrdom came at the hands of a recidivist sect. She was captured and tortured over long months, the heretics attempting to break her spirit and make her recant her faith in the Emperor. Lucia's eyes were gouged out, and she was forced to listen to the screams of thousands of innocents as they themselves were tortured to death. Unknown to her, a group of her own sisters were amongst those killed in this way, but it is said that not one of them uttered a sound as they endured their torments, so as not to cause their matriarch any more pain than she had already suffered. Lucia eventually died, and the recidivists claimed loudly that they had shattered her resolve. But over the following decade, the Order of the Valorious Heart tracked down and captured every last member of the sect, all of whom confessed to lying about the matriarch's lapse of faith. What became of those heretics is not known outside the Order. What is known is that a contingent of Sisters Hospitaller from the Order of the Silent Vow had been seconded to the Valorious Heart ever since that time, and its sisters have been putting their knowledge of life extension and pain enhancement to use deep beneath the sanctuary of Lucia's reprisal. The example set by Lucia in her life, as well as through her martyrdom, has led to the Order of the Valorious Heart employing methods of warfare that are unique amongst the Adepta Sororitas. At the outset of battle, the sisters pray to the Emperor and their matriarch for the strength to endure the horrors to come. They then launch offensives to cut off their foes' supply routes and lines of retreat. With the enemy locked in place, the Order begins sabotaging any infrastructure in the area. Water supplies are drained, fuel reserves destroyed, and pipelines transporting noxious substances are vented into the atmosphere. On feral worlds, Anything that could provide the enemy with the least sustenance is incinerated. In short order, the battlefield is transformed into a harrowing desert, with a grinding war of attrition remaining as the only path to victory for either side. Given the nightmarish conditions in which they choose to battle, it is no surprise that many sisters of the Valorious Heart bear gruesome scars. The stigmata of torn flesh is seen as a badge of honour amongst the Order, for it is a reminder of the suffering of Lucia. A sister who loses an eye in battle is considered truly blessed, for it allows her to better understand the pain endured by her matriarch, and to see more clearly the path of faith before her. Sisters of the Valorious Heart rarely accept numbing agents or pain-reducing stims when their wounds are being tended to, even where surgery or amputation is required. To avoid the experience of pain in this way would be to deny the power of faith to overcome all suffering. The bulk of the Order of the Valorious Heart sanctuaries lie deep in the Ultima Segmentum, with the vast majority having been established during hard-fought wars against Xenos and traitor forces. Sanctified fortresses stand amidst death-world swamps, jagged mountain ranges and barren wastelands that were scoured of life millennia ago. Relief sculptures and stained armor-glass panes within these sanctuaries depict Sororitas obliterating hordes of Xenos and roasting foul heretics in cleansing flames. Many of the sanctuary planets were plunged into darkness when the Great Rift tore open, and were invaded by demons or subjected to mass Drukhari raids. Yet the Order has not wavered in its faith. Though many of its preceptories were cut off from the light of the Emperor, they believe he still sees their struggles. They refer to this time of great trial as the hour of absiniation. For the Imperium and Xenos has been blinded, just as Lucia has. But like their Primarch, the Order of the Valorious Heart have steeled themselves to endure whatever torments are thrust upon them. Absolution through pain. The Order of the Valorious Heart are not alone in their tenets of penitence through the acceptance of suffering, though they are among the most zealous in their practice. Amongst the Order's militant, the feared sisters known as dogmata rigorously enforce their sisterhood's prescribed regulations and ensure cast-iron adherence to the most minute of sacred observances. Dogmata have the power to denounce a fellow battle sister as wanting for piety or for skill. They carry pain shackles and torture implements as a reminder to their fellow sisters of their role in detaining and punishing those who fall beneath their strict standards, consigning them to the ranks of the Sister Repentia, or the dreaded Mortifiers. Sisters Repentia comprise those members of the Adepta Sororitas found guilty of a host of sins, from minor infringements of esoteric commandments to willful disobedience, or even a simple failure in the face of overwhelming odds. Stripped of rank and armour, Repentia atone for their crimes in battle, carrying immense eviscerators to which the sisters' flesh is bound with agonizing barbs and seals of oath. Sisters Repentia, who abandon their redemptive quest and flee, are guilty of a sin greater than all, save the unthinkable act of outright heresy. As punishment, they are wired into the mechanism of a mortifier. These engines of penance leave the wayward sister unable to move or scream. Her sole mission now is one of enforced atonement. Tormented by neuro-agonizer arrays that amplify her self-loathing, and divorced from her sister's prayers by an enclosing baffle around her head, the unfortunate pilot's spiritual suffering fuels the mortifier. They storm forward as terrifying shock troops, unleashing streams of holy fire and explosive bolts before crashing into the foe, their flails and saws reaping a bloody tally. The Order of the Bloody Rose. The fires of righteous anger. The Order of the Bloody Rose are the embodiment of the Emperor's hatred toward the heretic, the psyker, and the mutant. Their wars of faith are not waged to save the innocent, but to slaughter the guilty, for only in death can the vile be made pure. The matriarch of the Order of the Bloody Rose is Saint Mina, who was as renowned for her dark, brooding nature as she was for her deadly skill in battle. What few records survived through the Reign of Blood suggest that she served as Alicia Dominica's champion, and that when Sebastian Thor's armies descended upon Terra, she slew some of the mightiest invading warriors in hand-to-hand combat. One account, albeit riddled with inconsistencies, suggests that she duelled with the leader of the custodians who entered the ecclesiastical palace during the siege, and that the two fought to a standstill before words of an alliance were finally spoken. Whether true or not, and frankly must be not true, the Sisters of the Bloody Rose revere Mina as the epitome of the martial virtues laid out by the daughters of the Emperor, and dedicate themselves to emulating her violent prowess. From the first War of Faith, the Sisters of the Bloody Rose made a name for themselves as brutal executioners. They were dispatched to the Nephilim sector to put down the Slaneshi pain cults that had transformed many Imperial shrine worlds into planet-spanning torture chambers. Hospitalers of the Order of Serenity and Dialogi of the Order of the Quill followed in the wake of the Sororitas, where they were to tend to the bodies and souls of the faithful after the afflicted worlds had been liberated by the Bloody Rose. But when the non-militant orders arrived in the war zone, they found only death. The militant sisters had moved from planet to planet, mercilessly butchering the cultists they encountered without stopping to free the pain cult's imprisoned victims. When the last of the Slaneshi worshippers had been eradicated, the Canoness Superior of the Bloody Rose, who upon her death would become canonized as Saint Marie, penned the Thorn Treatise, using the blood of those sisters who had fallen to record the teachings of this war. In the treatise, she outlined that the path of least evil lies with the swift extirpation of those who oppose the faith, and therefore mercy in any form must come after the meting out of righteous anger. From the moment a sister joins the Bloody Rose, she is taught to foster and harness her most violent impulses so that they may be unleashed upon the enemies of the faith. Litanies of heretical deeds are intoned as novitiates engage in combat trials, the tales of spiritual traitors and vile apostates filling the trainees with righteous hatred. Prayers that would be whispered in silence by other orders are bellowed loudly within the Bloody Rose's sanctuaries. In place of contemplative meditation, the sisters learn to light the fires of rage within themselves, even when they are not faced with provocation. Alongside such practices, they also train to focus their anger, for they are taught that to allow oneself to be overtaken by apoplexy is as great a sin as indulging in notions of clemency. Through constant drilling, they learn to unleash their inner hatred, only when it is most effective, channeling it with the explosive force of a shot fired from a bolt gun. The Bloody Rose's precepts of anger have truly brutal results when unleashed upon the battlefield. The sisters advance with disciplined maneuvers, using weight of fire to gain advantage over a flank or employing cunning feats to draw their enemy into overcommitting. As soon as the foe is at close range, the sisters charge, striking at the moment they crash into the enemy lines, and screaming wrathful praise as they give vent to their hatred. Gun stocks are swung with enough force to shatter helms and the skulls within. Chainswords are driven mercilessly through torsos, then wrenched out and thrust again before the spilt innards hit the ground. The power-armoured warriors deliver murderous kicks, punches, and elbows that crack bones and burst organs. But in this flurry of carnage, each sister attacks with practiced precision, her rage only manifesting in the instant of impact before it is once more reined in. The Order of the Bloody Rose believes sheer martial ferocity to be a manifestation of the Emperor's will. They pray to be granted the skill alacrity, and outrage of their matriarch in battle. Often a sister facing down a hulking Chaos champion or Xenos monstrosity will glow with rage. Rivulets of energy gather around her into a crackling nimbus, her eyes becoming a deep red, and tears of blood streak down her cheeks. She moves with lightning speed, dodging and parrying numerous death blows from her hated foe before landing her own immaculate killing strike. Such miraculous transformations are met with cries of exultation, for they know that Mina's soul is inhabiting the body of that blessed sister. Throughout the Imperium, there are many worlds once held by heretics that the Order of the Bloody Rose have sanctified by the spilling of blood. Amongst these planets is Hydrafor, where Mina was martyred. It is said that the servants of Khorne attacked the matriarch while she was alone in prayer. No other soul saw what transpired, but when Mina's body was discovered, it was surrounded by the brutalized corpses of her enemies. Armored heads and limbs lay strewn amongst the rubble, and gore flowed in rivers through cracks in the flagstones. The circumstances of her martyrdom are enshrined in the symbol of the Bloody Rose, which has a pair of crossed blades dripping with fresh blood. Editor's note. I know what you're thinking, but that would be heresy, so stop it. Though the Order of the Bloody Rose has committed a significant contingent of its sisters to war zones along the Great Rift, the majority of its forces are battling against incursions coming from the galactic south. They have met the tendrils of High Fleet Leviathan and Hydra on multiple fronts, where they have butchered the ravenous creatures and the gene-stealer cults that worship them. They have also fought a series of harrowing battles against the Thousand Suns cult of duplicity, combating the sorcerous machinations of the Tzeentch worshippers with bolt, blade, and faith. The Order of the Ebon Chalice, the perfection of sanctity. Obstinate in their traditions and indomitable in combat, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice seek to perfect the martial disciplines of the Daughters of the Emperor, employing tactics that have been honed over millennia to annihilate the enemies of the Imperium. The Order of the Ebon Chalice was the first of the Orders militant to be created, with its sisters drawn from the convent priories on Holy Terra. Its founder, leader, and matriarch was Alicia Dominica, slayer of the tyrant Van Dyer and chosen of the Emperor. Under her guidance, the Ebon Chalice quickly established itself as the exemplar against which all other orders would be measured. Dominica herself served as the military and spiritual head of the Adepta Sororitas. The Sisters of the Order displayed devotional and martial discipline that was second to none, with their fortitude in battle matched only by the depths of their faith. In their training on the field of war, they cleaved unerringly to the doctrines laid out by the Daughters of the Emperor, with the only adaptations being those that incorporated the use of modern imperial weaponry and armor. A desire to emulate the perfection of Dominica burned in the heart of every sister of the Ebon Chalice. Dominica repeatedly showed herself to be the God Emperor's most worthy champion, displaying her strength, constancy, and tactical acumen across myriad war zones. While other orders battled the faithless in the distant reaches of the Imperium, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice dedicated themselves to safeguarding the sanctity of Terra and the Segmentum Solar. Planet by planet, system by system, the Order expanded their parish, rooting out cults buried deep in the bowels of hive worlds and eradicating mutant conclaves that were infesting barren moons and isolated outposts. Shrine worlds that had long ago fallen to Xenos invasions were besieged by waves of chanting warriors. Wherever the servants of chaos were found, they were met with damning oaths and cleansing flames. As they brought more territories under their care, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice were able to expose scores of planetary governors and Astra Militarum officers whose practices did not conform to the exact letter of the Imperial Creed. Preachers and confessors were called upon to make examples of the unrighteous, and where such efforts to enforce true faith were met with resistance, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice marched forth to purge the impure. No sinner was safe under the exacting gaze of Dominica's order. During these early wars of faith, Dominica carried the Grail of Ages with her to war, the goblet of black stone that was created to be the embodiment of the matriarch's communion with the Emperor. Little is known about the Grail and the power it held. Few accounts exist of this relic's holy energy being unleashed on the battlefield, and details they provide range between the miraculous and the heretical. Awed ecclesiastical scribes wrote that when Dominica poured out the vessel's contents, the God Emperor's voice boomed, and with a single word shattered whole armies. Well-guarded records of the Astra Telepathica show instances in which every psyche on a planet spontaneously burst into flames when the matriarch of the Ebon Chalice carried the Grail into battle. It is believed that there are tales of the Grail of Ages within the eldritch tomes of the Black Library, and possibly even in the writhing pages of the Book of Magnus. As for the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice, they do not speak of its powers, but have always professed that the relic symbolizes their sacred duty and eternal burden, that they are the bearers of the secrets learnt by Dominica before the Golden Throne, and are the vessels of the God Emperor's holy truth. This goes some way to explain why the Order has ever sought to destroy any texts concerning the Grail, and have immolated their scribes as heretics. After several centuries of faithful service to the Emperor and her Order, Alicia Dominica was martyred, falling in combat during the scouring of Fried's Wide's world. Not since the passing of Sebastian Thor had the bell tower of the ecclesiastical palace tolled so dolefully. Her martyrdom left a gaping void in the organization of the Adepta Sororitas, for none amongst the ranks considered themselves worthy to follow in her hallowed footsteps. Eventually, Sister Palmiro, a dialogus of the Order of the Holy Word, was chosen by her peers as the most suitable to take over from the fallen matriarch and become abbess of the Adepta Sororitas. Palmiro accepted, but not before solemnly expressing that she can never hope to equal her predecessor's faith, vision, or fortitude. It was this humility that made Palmiro the obvious choice, for to serve the Sororitas, the ecclesiarchy, and the Emperor in Dominica's stead was regarded not as a mark of honour, but as the undertaking of a grave and thankless responsibility. The Sisters of the Ebon Chalice have striven to embody Dominica's perfection in all they do. While they have waged wars of faith across the galaxy, they remain a bulwark of faith in the segmentum solar, combating gross nonconformity with flame and blade. They view themselves as first amongst the Sororitas, the order that all others must strive to emulate. On those rare and grave occasions where a group of sisters has a lapse in faith, it is the Ebon Chalice that is called upon to bring the judgment of the Emperor, the ecclesiarchy, and Dominica down upon them. Like all of humanity, the Order of the Ebon Chalice has been faced with untold horrors since the Great Rift opened. Alongside their allies of old, the Adeptus Custodes, Space Marines, and Adeptus Mechanicus, the spiritual descendants of Dominica fight to keep the unleashed forces of chaos from overwhelming the segmentum solar. The Sisters have eradicated several warbands of Chaos Space Marines, most notably the Blades of the Despoiler, a cornate host of the Black Legion, whose path of slaughter was headed directly for the Throne World. Yet the Ebon Chalice has also taken heavy losses. Though the Schola Progenium proffers a constant stream of new recruits, only the most promising are accepted into the Order, and of those only a small percentage prove themselves in the grueling initiation rites to become Battle Sisters. This has left the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice straining against the sheer weight of the heretical incursions. But they are far from broken. Each is an expert in the ancient forms of battle established by the Daughters of the Emperor, a warrior who has mastered both their weaponry and their faith. Those who prove themselves worthy enough to rise to the rank of Celestian or Zephyrim are amongst the most skilled veterans in the entire Adepta Sororitas. The most honoured of these sisters are even entrusted with a portion of the hallowed truth, learnt by their matriarch in the Chamber of the Golden Throne. Rosarius. Dogmatic tradition and the cleaving to ancient law are deeply ingrained within the Adeptus Ministorum. Ancient icons, the possession of legendary saints, tomes of scripture and statues to which miracles are ascribed are carefully maintained, and their spiritual meaning rigidly espoused. Artifacts crafted in their image possess a sacred symbolism, even if the original is long lost or destroyed. Amongst the most widely seen of these simulacra is the Rosarius. The Rosarius contains a conversion field generator that amplifies the spiritual will of the wearer into a physical shield of energy, often in the form of an amulet. Each is a treasured relic of Imperial technology, bestowed only upon those who have proven themselves to be possessed of a worthy soul. They are carried by ordained clergy of the cult Imperialis, and there are rare examples of them being gifted to high-ranking laity, whose devotion has been of great service to the ecclesiarchy. They are also worn by the chaplains of the Adeptus Astartes to symbolize the uneasy peace between the Ministorum and the Space Marine chapters. Amongst the Adepta Sororitas, Rosarius has further significance as a symbol of the pact made between the daughters of the Emperor and Gog Van Dyer. It was by Van Dyer's Rosarius that the daughters were swayed to his cause, yet the same Rosarius failed him when he was revealed as a traitor. The weight of a Rosarius around a canoness's neck is a constant reminder that true faith requires eternal vigilance against the faithless. The Order of the Argent Shroud. The Silver Spearhead. Like a silver bolt, the Sisters of the Argent Shroud strike at the Emperor's enemies. They are renowned for their speed in combat, and are often first into the fray, where their faith in their protector saint shines brightest. The matriarch of the Argent Shroud is Sylvana, first martyred and most mysterious of Dominica's bodyguard. Her service as the head of the Order was brief. Shortly after Alicia Dominica had founded the Order of the Ebon Chalice, the remaining sisters of the Convent Prioris were placed under Sylvana's command. But Sylvana was struck down before launching a single war of faith. The most reliable records concur that a death cult assassin poisoned her, although these accounts vary wildly in their speculations as to motive. Some suggest the murder was an agent still loyal to Van Dyer's vision of the ecclesiarchy, whereas others propose that the forces of the heretical Alpha Legion played a hand in the fell deed. The Sisters of the Argent Shroud hold that it was Dominica whom the assassin had attempted to slay, and Sylvana had sacrificed herself in order to save the Emperor's chosen one. This is in keeping with her character, for on numerous occasions she had placed herself in harm's way to protect the least of her allies. The Journal of the Ecclesiarch, Alexis 22, relates that while Sylvana's body was laid in state within the inner sanctum of the Convent Prioris, after 7 days it's mysteriously vanished. Only a silver image of her bones was left, imprinted on her death shroud, and it is from this treasured relic that her order received its name. The Order of the Argent Shroud teaches that deeds are more powerful than words when it comes to purifying the spirit and purging the taint of corruption from the Imperium. This belief is derived from the example of Sylvana, whose acts of bravery and faithfulness were well recorded during the Age of Apostasy, yet not a single word spoken by her is recorded in any surviving transcription from the time. Her sisters emulate this by speaking very little, and by entering long periods of complete silence whenever they engage in training. This limitation of speech does not preclude them from prayer or worship, and like the members of other orders, they still chant hymns of wrathful purgation as they march into battle. But the Sisters of the Argent Shroud believe that it is more righteous to provide their service to the God Emperor than it is to ask for his holy favour. They avoid formulating grand stratagems and rarely communicate intended tactics to their allies, to the ire of many imperial generals. Simply put, the Order places its trust in the divine guidance of the Emperor more than in the carefully orchestrated plans of his fallible servants. The results achieved by the Argent Shroud soon put paid to any misgivings. Spearheads of silver-clad warriors race towards teeming Xenos throngs, and invasion cathedrams hurtle onto worlds, writhing with chaos energy. With swift surges, the Sororitas smash through the defensive formations of far larger armies, destroying monstrous artillery batteries stationed behind the enemy lines, and permanently silencing the demagoguery of heretical enemy commanders. Lightning-fast assaults are followed by rapid withdrawals, as the foe reels in confusion. The Sisters of the Argent Shroud reform and strike again. By committing themselves so boldly to these offensives, the warriors of the Argent Shroud often leave themselves cut off from support, surrounded and outgunned. But it is in such circumstances that their faith shines brightest. Filled with divine conviction, the Sororitas fight on against impossible odds, standing strong amidst the carnage as they drop their foes one by one, knowing that Sylvana watches over them in battle. Those sisters who fall often save their entire squad from annihilation with their dying action, throwing themselves into the line of fire just as their matriarch would have done. Due to their propensity for hit-and-run assaults, the Sisters with the Argent Shroud have some of the deadliest and most experienced shock troops of all the Adepta Sororitas. Many of the Order's commanderies boast large contingents of Dominion squads who are deployed en masse to break through the defensive lines of unsuspecting enemies, or are sent in small numbers to infiltrate fortresses, macro bunkers and command centres in hostile territory. These dominions are also leaders in many of the Order's rites of worship, their prayers on the battlefield often being the first intoned, before being echoed by the other sisters. A peculiarity amongst the Order of the Argent Shroud lies with how they treat their dead. Where the members of other orders cry out when a comrade is slain, reciting prayers to guide the fallen soul to the Emperor and oaths of holy vengeance against the enemy, the Sisters of the Argent Shroud say not a word. Amongst their ranks, death is met with silence. Certain ecclesiastical scholars attribute this to a belief within the Order that martyrdom is a luxury, a reprieve from sacred duty that should only come when there are no more enemies left to slay. Yet the dead Sororitas are still handled with great care and solemnity after the fighting has finished. The martyrs are removed from the battlefield in sombre processions, their wounds cleaned and dressed, their armour repaired and polished, and they are laid to rest for 7 days in the sanctuary in which they served. After that, the bodies are removed, though what becomes of them after this point is not known by anyone outside the Order. The majority of the Argent Shroud sanctuaries lie in the region of space that abuts the jagged mass of warp storms known as the Great Rift. During the Noctis Eterna, when chaos energies were blasted across the galaxy and the light of the Holy Astronomicon was temporarily extinguished, many of these sanctuary worlds were thought lost. Screaming maelstroms enveloped entire sub-parishes, while countless other worlds under the Order's watch were bathed in the warping glow of the Cicatrix Maledictum. In the harrowing years since, the Order has continued to fight against the marauding chaos forces without showing any sign of diminishment. The Sororitas appear without warning in raging war zones along the breadth of the Great Rift, striking with crippling speed at their unprepared enemies. Multiple preceptories that were thought lost have since been seen in battle, and though they say nothing of the fates of their sanctuary worlds, they fight with unmatched hatred against the servants of the Dark Gods. The Order of the Sacred Rose, the light of battle's serenity. Wreathed in holy light and possessed of divine serenity, The Sisters of the Sacred Rose are the calm at the centre of a violent storm. Their hymns of hope and salvation are underscored in battle by the crack of bolts and the roar of burning promethium. More so than any other order, the Sacred Rose vow that they are not only devout servants of the God Emperor, they are the conduits of his divine will. Through them is his glory made manifest in the galaxy, for their words and actions are guided by his infallible wisdom. The Order teaches that victory comes from faith and faith alone. If a warrior has enough faith, she can command the stars to consume her enemies, and the Emperor will make it so. The Sisters act on this belief in every battle, war and crusade they wage, trusting the triumphal slaughter of their foes has been preordained. Even when one of their number falls, they know that this too is a part of the Emperor's plan. A single martyr can spark a fire in 1,000 souls, giving rise to an inferno of faith that can never be extinguished. These beliefs give the Sisters of the Sacred Rose an air of devout serenity that approaches that held by their matriarch Arabella. She was renowned for her calm nature in the face of horror, and was known among Alicia Dominica's guard as being the most even-tempered. It is widely told that Arabella was instrumental in the negotiations between Dominica and the custodian who led the matriarchs before the Golden Throne. Arabella subsequently earned the honorific of Liberator, for she sought to break the shackles of fear and doubt that bound the faithful, and strove to free humanity from the evils of the faithless. Though a formidable combatant, her true strength sprang from the abundance of miracles that are said to have happened in her presence. There are stories of heretics imploding into lumps of smouldering flesh as her gaze fell upon them, being crushed by the weight of their own wickedness, or having their eyes melt from their faces as they beheld her glory. Though Arabella was only canonized posthumously, she performed countless miracles during her lifetime. She travelled the Imperium, serving as a commander and beacon of faith for many decades. The circumstances surrounding her martyrdom are not recorded in any ecclesiastical text, but in the 38th millennium the Order of the Sacred Rose was founded in her name. Ecclesiarch Decius VI formed the order from the Sisters of the Convent Prioris, and from the outset the Sacred Rose proved themselves worthy of their matriarch. Through their wars of faith they brought the light of the Emperor to regions long lost to the darkness. Imperial planets were freed from the yoke of heretical tyrants, cabals of Xenos mystics were hunted down and butchered, and sanctuaries were established to serve as outposts of divinity in the most remote corners of the Imperium. The Sacred Rose forged a sizable parish in the Ultima Segmentum, but like Arabella, they brought their faith to bear across the galaxy. When the Sisters of the Sacred Rose march to war, they do so in a state of holy grace. Scores of sororitas advance in perfect tactical harmony, adapting fluidly to the shifting tides of battle. Squads unleash the firepower of the Holy Trinity with measured discipline. As they do so, they lift their voices, singing lilting hymns in praise of the Emperor. This symphony of choral worship and roaring weaponry quickly drowns out the screams of dying mutants and the wet tearing of heretical flesh. The Sisters press the attack wherever their enemy shows weakness, sending frag grenades sailing into gaps and formations and blasting the exposed flanks of artillery with superheated melter beams. Where the foe shows strength, the sororitas stand firm, locking ranks against the assaults and cutting down on-rushing attackers with deliberate and devastating salvos. Yet it is their seamless pairing of faith with physical prowess that makes them a truly indomitable force. Miraculous bursts of speed are factored into redeployment maneuvers, whilst the spontaneous combustion of nearby foes is relied upon as much as any chainsword or bolt pistol. Assured of the Emperor's providence, the Sisters of the Sacred Rose maintain their ineffable serenity as they slaughter all before them. The Order of the Sacred Rose are often accompanied to war by an inordinate number of ecclesiastical followers. Ministorum priests and their fanatical conclaves flock to the sororitas, eager to witness the miracles that will unfold. As such, even small missions are rarely short of soldiers. A corps of sororitas may be supported by many devotees of the imperial cult, their prayers and cries of penance intermingling with the battle hymn of the Sacred Rose. Canonesses of the Order welcome these faithful auxiliaries and teach the sisters in their charge that the Emperor has the power to act for the least of his servants. Arabella herself was known to gather the unwashed rabble to her banner in times of battle, and it is said that the power of her conviction transformed them into armies of indomitable warriors. The Order's ability to draw others to their cause has been of crucial value since the Great Rifts tore open. The occluding mass of warp storms has plunged hundreds of thousands of worlds into perpetual darkness. Astropathic lines of communication have been severed by the psychic upheaval. Cut off from the light of the Astronomicon, navigators are unable to guide ships between distant stars, and so even those cries for help that are received can rarely be answered with action. The majority of the Sacred Rose's sanctuaries lie deep within the Imperium Nihilus, but few have succumbed to the nightmares unleashed across that half of the galaxy. The Sisters of the Sacred Rose have remained a steadfast beacon of hope, and have fought the enemies of the faith with the same resoluteness of spirit that they have always possessed. Where many worlds were consumed by panic and fear, even before the servants of the dark gods fell upon them, those under the care of the Order have become bastions of defiance. Sororitas patrols execute anyone who expresses doubt in the security of the Imperium. At the same time, Astra Militarum regiments are commanded by the Order, and soldiers showing the slightest hints of mutation are expunged. The Sisters lead the defense of these worlds against the legions of demons and heretic Astartes. Yet it is not only their own worlds that they fight to protect. The Sisters of the Sacred Rose have miraculously appeared in multiple war zones across the Imperium Nihilus. Few question how the Sororitas are able to hear their calls for reinforcement, or how they manage to navigate amidst the darkness and horror. Those that do are told by the Sisters that Arabella always provides guidance, even when the Emperor's will is not clear. Orders Minoris. Spread across the Imperium are hundreds of smaller orders militant. Some have numbers enough to oversee large parishes, whereas others maintain only a single sanctuary. Each of these orders minoris is a spiritual descendant of one of the 6 original orders, but operates independently in prosecuting their wars of faith. The Order of the Glowing Chalice. As spiritual descendants of the Order of the Ebon Chalice, the Sisters of the Glowing Chalice are exacting in their standards of faith and martial prowess. They have established a chain of sanctuaries across the Quorward portion of the Vidil subsector, and have battled multiple chaos incursions alongside the scions of the 9th Iotan Gorgons. When launching assaults, the Sisters attack with the Terran Dawn, striking when terror rises over a war-torn world's horizon, though the planets on which they battle are far too distant for the light of Sol to reach. The Sisters of the Glowing Chalice still feel the Emperor's illumination falling upon them. Order of the Thorn. The Order of the Thorn is a rampaging force that butchers its way to victory, having adapted the martial practices of the Order of the Bloody Rose. Sisters of the Thorn enter prolonged states of fury, hacking and stabbing at foes until all are slaughtered before them, or until they themselves are made martyrs. In doing this, they seek to recreate the last moments of St. Mina's life, transforming themselves into whirlwinds of death, before which the faithless cannot hope to stand. By the battle's end, the pale armour worn by these sisters is covered in crimson gore, while the skin of those placed to rest in the Order's crypts is left permanently covered with the ichor of their hated foes. Order of the Iron Veil. The Sisters of the Iron Veil are renowned for their mental and spiritual resilience. They specialize in launching surgical strikes into war zones where psychic warfare is being used to mutilate reality. Their order was once a preceptory of the Argent Shroud that was thought lost during the Cerebite uprisings. When the last Cerebite prince had been hunted down and killed, the sisters were found intact. Their sanctuary had not only endured the horrors that had torn through the subsector, but had kept their world from devouring itself, and had even continued recruiting battle sisters. Shortly after, they were named a new order by the decree of Ecclesiarch Dorrel III. The Order of the Ashen Shrine. When the Order of the Ashen Shrine marched to war, Pyrrhic miracles soon follow. Many are the stories of the sisters driving their enemies into volcanic fissures that have torn open on the battlefield, of burning meteorites raining down on the formations of their foes, and of war machines exploding into destructive infernos when fired upon by the Sororitas. Like the sacred rose from which they were split, the warriors of the Ashen Shrine revere Saint Arabella, believing that the Emperor spoke through her. To emulate their matriarch, the sisters wield a great number of flamers, believing that the gouts of fire signify the Emperor's holy word. Order of the Wounded Heart. Among the orders that have split from the Valorious Heart, the Wounded Heart is unique in that its sisters recite only a single verse from the Passion of St. Lucia. The verse in question, verse 482, describes how the saint's right hand was flensed, and yet, through her suffering, she remained faithful. As an act of communion, the Sisters of the Wounded Heart also deglove their own right hands, ritually stripping them of skin to keep the flesh and nerves raw. In this way they feel Lucia's pain whenever they grip their weapon and pull the trigger, allowing them to meditate on the saint's excruciation as they unleash death upon the faithless. The Order of the Golden Light. One of the smallest of the orders militant, the Order of the Golden Light has nonetheless inspired great hope and fear across numerous wars of faith. They are distant descendants of the Order of our Martyred Lady, yet they continue to embody the fiery passion of the matriarch Saint Catherine. On 2 separate occasions, the entire order has been confirmed to be martyred in battle, only for the golden-clad sisters to reappear in a nearby war zone. There are whispers that the Schola Progenium databanks contain no record of the order recruiting new members, giving rise to the belief that the Sisters of the Golden Light are all martyrs who have been resurrected. Non-militant orders. The Daughters of the Emperor were more than a community of warriors and devoted themselves to a wide range of disciplines by which they could serve the God Emperor. Many of these disciplines survived the age of apostasy and have been further developed by the Adepta Sororitas through specialized categories of non-militant orders. The Orders Hospitaller. With the exception of the Adeptus Astartes chapters, the Orders Hospitaller provide surgeons, physicians, and nurses to all arms of the imperial military. Sisters of these orders exhibit their faith by operating in grueling battlefield conditions, sawing off and cauterizing limbs that have been mangled by blasts of warp energy, and digging living munitions from the guts of screaming soldiers. They perform these acts with an air of solemnity and compassion, and are often regarded as holy figures by the combatants under their care. Indeed, many Sisters Hospitaller have been canonized as saints posthumously for their miraculous skills. Sisters of the Orders Hospitaller can be found accompanying many branches of the Imperium's military forces. They are renowned for their skills both on and off the battlefield, and are often deployed to war zones where new and grotesque weapons are being brought to bear against the Imperial warriors. The sanctuaries of the Orders Hospitaller contain massive libraries detailing the most esoteric tools of death that mankind has encountered. These are accompanied by the extensive journals of sisters who have spent their lives researching how best to ameliorate their devastating effects. Some orders operate alongside the Ordo Sepultorum in studying weaponized plagues, be they biological, technological, or demonic in origin, while the most esoteric amongst them work to develop protections against psychic assaults. The Orders Hospitaller have been known to work in close conjunction with the Orders Famulus, mapping bloodlines and genealogy in order to stem the spread of mutation and combat the threat that aberrant evolution poses to humanity. Just as they study the effects of enemy weaponry on human soldiers, so too do the Orders Hospitaller dedicate themselves to understanding the physiology of their enemies. Where previously unknown Xenos species are encountered, the Sisters Hospitaller work tirelessly to find weak spots in their biology. Ecclesiarchal confessors also rely on the expertise of these sisters to preserve the lives of those who are being questioned for heresy. It is not uncommon for a Sisters Hospitaller to reattach limbs or suture mortal wounds multiple times before a confessor is able to extract the truth from a suspected heretic. Orders Famulus. The Orders Famulus form a network of chamberlains, advisors, and diplomats whose sacred duty is to guide the Imperium's noble families in working towards the ultimate good of mankind. Sisters of these orders play crucial roles in brokering trade agreements between obstinate planetary governors, forging alliances between powerful plutocratic families, and arranging marriages to continue the lineages of the Emperor's most loyal and useful subjects. When a planet, system, or subsector is faced with direct hostilities, the Sisters Famulus coordinate the efforts of those over whom they have oversight, ensuring that a noble household has everything they require to effectively fight and die for the Imperium. Concomitant to their diplomatic duties, the Orders Famulus also provide the Ecclesiarchy with watchful eyes throughout the Imperium. Sister Famulus's presence within the upper echelons of society allows her to closely observe the dealings of the most influential individuals, from appointed bureaucrats and strong-armed tyrants to rogue traders and navis nobilitae dignitaries. Should the activities of these powerful people in any way go against the dictates of the Adeptus Ministorum, the Sisters' reports to her superiors may result in stringent countermeasures. Confessors may be sent to extract admissions of heresy, and in extreme cases the Orders Militant are alerted to cases of widespread treachery. Families who have held lofty positions for generations have been eradicated in their entirety, their crypts incinerated, and their names stricken from all records on the word of a Sister Famulus. Shepherding the nobility in this way is crucial to preserving the sanctity of the Imperium. Those who attempt to hide from the sight of the Orders Famulus are seen as opponents of the Imperial Creed. In the course of their duties, Sisters Famulus often speak of how the Emperor manifests his will through his subjects, pointing to the miracles performed by the Imperium's many saints as evidence. Given that the Orders Famulus have access to the genealogical records of uncounted millions of Imperial citizens, and that they actively encourage diplomatic and familial unions between the most powerful members of Imperial society, it is unsurprising that their hand is often to be seen at work, before, during, and after a manifestation of the Emperor's grace is recorded. Orders Dialogus. The Sisters of the Orders Dialogus serve as scholars and advisors. They are expert translators of texts both human and Xenos, holy and blasphemous, and spend years learning languages used in esoteric scripts. Much of their study is devoted to collating ancient scriptures that give accounts of the God Emperor before his internment within the Golden Throne. Humans on many of the worlds rediscovered during the Great Crusade recorded the coming of the Emperor as did those Xenos species upon whom his fury reigned. The Sisters Dialogus translate these accounts from their long-forgotten languages of origin into Imperial High Gothic, and through them reveal more of the Emperor's glory. The Orders Dialogus are also frequently called upon for their unparalleled expertise in cryptography. Their ability to unlock obscure ciphers and find patterns across vast reams of communiques ensure that the Adepta Sororitas, as well as the ecclesiarchy at large, have access to intelligence on their enemies, both within the Imperium and beyond. Sisters Dialogus also provide many services for the Inquisition. They use their skills to interpret heretical meanings hidden in seemingly mundane speech and text, and thereby bring secretive traitors to justice. In a war zone, Sisters Dialogus act as conduits through which canonesses of the militant orders can intone commands and prayers of defiance, ensuring that formations operating in isolation remain in communication with their spiritual leader. Large contingents from the Orders Dialogus also remain on a world after the enemy has been purged, assisting the other ecclesiarchal servants as they scour the planet for traces of heresy. The most senior of the Orders Dialogus maintain the ancient texts held within the Vault of Origins. Only the highest-ranking members of the ecclesiarchy are allowed access to this most holy archive, for it is rumoured that the heaviest of secrets regarding the events of the Age of Apostasy and Van Dyer's Reign of Blood are locked away within it. Other non-militant orders. There are many other types of orders that provide ancillary services within the Adepta Sororitas, as well as for the ecclesiarchy and the wider Imperium. In some cases, a single order is tasked with a particularly focused duty and given their own designation, as is the case with the Order Fenestrus, who maintain the illuminated armour-glass panes of the Imperium's most holy shrines and cathedrals. Other types of orders carry out sacred duties that give them a great deal of influence within the God Emperor's domain. For instance, the Orders Sabine operate at the very edges of human space, accompanying the Missionarius Galaxia to newly rediscovered human worlds. They specialize in infiltrating the regressed and primitive societies that it is believed would oppose the arrival of the Imperium. Sisters Sabine set themselves up as prophets of the Emperor, preaching the Imperial Creed in secret or fomenting revolt against the religious leaders of a world. When the Missionarius Galaxia arrives and announces its presence to the world's peoples, the Sisters Sabine have already prophesied such an event, and they lead those natives sympathetic to the Imperial Creed in a sudden and deadly coup against their leaders. Through her work, Sister Sabine will be cut off from the Imperium for a great many years, perhaps only returning to Terra or Ophelia 7 once in her lifetime. Some types of non-militant orders are unknown in one or the other great convent, or else their sisters are located only in a specific region of the Imperium. The order's princeps lie only within the hierarchy of the convent sanctorum on Ophelia 7. Their scholarly sisters, with augmented neural interfaces, are a common sight amongst the corridors of power of the ecclesiarchy. A result of some of Sebastian Thor's far-reaching reforms, the order's princeps monitor the cardinals and their debates within the Holy Synod on Terra and the Synod Ministra on Ophelia 7. They ensure that the relay and dissemination of the ecclesiarchal law is carried out without deviation, acting as both guardians of its purity and well-placed informants on its abuse. The Order's Tarantine, meanwhile, restrict their duties solely to the Tarentia Pillars, a region of dense gas, little more than a sector across. The Sisters Tarantine divine the God Emperor's will through the changing patterns in the gaseous medium, and their holy visions are reputed to be more accurate than a reading of the Imperial Tarot. The Orders Pronatus specialize in retrieving, guarding, studying, and repairing artifacts of value to the ecclesiarchy. This includes the uncounted thousands of holy relics revered by the peoples of the Imperium, as well as items captured by the forces of the Imperium that are considered too powerful or significant to be allowed to fall into enemy hands. Sisters Pronatus have the responsibility of maintaining and blessing the many banners and symbols of the Order's militant, and have even been called upon to reconsecrate the livery of other imperial bodies. It was members of the Orders Pronatus who repaired the chapter banner of the Lamenters after their involvement in the Badab War. They have also restored many of the Cadians' regimental standards that were recovered from the 13th Black Crusade, cleansing every fibre in holy oils and recording the names of martyrs in the golden thread. The various Orders Pronatus include not only artisans and artificers of sacred relics, they are also entrusted with the security of some of the ecclesiarchy's greatest holy objects, monitoring vault protocols and advising on the defence and preservation of them. In the case of the holiest relics, those whose presence on the battlefield is requested to demonstrate the God Emperor's power, a detail of trained Sisters Pronatus is selected to accompany them. Some, like the revered guardians of the triumph of St. Catherine, are former battle sisters of the Order's militant, now rededicated to one of the Orders Pronatus, and tasked with applying their skills to the protection of relics. Astrid Thurger, Reliquant at Arms. The position of Reliquant at Arms is typically reserved for a senior Pronatus of long standing within their order. They are as skilled in the tender ministrations required by ancient artifacts as they are in the merciless destruction of any who threaten them. They are inducted into the deeper mysteries of their order's specialisms, learning the sacred substances, delicate skills, ritual prayers, and obeisances required to ensure such objects retain their purity. Astrid Thurger is dedicated to the protection of a single relic above all others, the Auto Tapestry of the Emperor's Judgment. Since her appointment as Reliquant at Arms, she has not strayed more than an arm's length from the banner. The Auto Tapestry was said to have appeared as a vision to the first canoness of the Order of the August Vigil, the order to which Astrid belongs. It remained only partially complete upon the canoness's death, her successor taking up the threads after her. 5 successive leaders of the Order lived and died before the vision was realized and the standard completed. None but Sister Astrid touched this relic. It is maintained and guarded by her alone. She trains in its shadow, she prays before it, and when her order are called upon to grant the Auto Tapestry's presence alongside a ward of faith, it is she who meditates at the banner's side before deciding whether to allow it. Astrid's meditations, under the gaze of the God Emperor's depiction, have resulted in unique and inchoate insights, which have led her to bear the Auto Tapestry to far-flung war zones without request. Beneath its imperious gaze, zealous sisters of the Adepta Sororitas feel the God Emperor's immortal benevolence and strive ever harder against seemingly insurmountable odds to prove worthy of his continued protection. Heroines have been made in the standard's presence. There are tales of individual sisters fighting on, imbued with a divine strength, after losing an arm or having been blinded. To record their deeds, the Adeptus Ministorum dispatched the Hagiolata Agatha Dolan. Born into a noble family with ancient links to the priesthood, Agatha inscribes details of the heroic feats as a witness to the divine, simultaneously speaking them into a complex mechanism connected to blessed Nemo wafers. She has followed Astrid into some of the bloodiest battlefields, and the two have formed a mutual respect, leavened by Agatha's gallows humour. The priest carries her scrolls and tomes containing hagiographies of countless saints. In the acts she witnesses, Agatha believes she sees echoes of ancient deeds that need only be interpreted correctly to hear the God Emperor's word. The vestments of purity. The warriors of the Adepta Sororitas march to war in the traditional colours of their orders. Their finely crafted armour is bedecked with holy trappings of their faith and, alongside the sigils of their order, their flowing robes are embroidered with the iconography of the Adepta Sororitas. The Battle Sisters' sacred garb is honoured as an intrinsic element of their faith, as much a part of their rituals as holy icons. Such powerful war gear, as well as prized weaponry the sisters bear, is considered a gift from the God Emperor to his chosen warriors, to be used in the defence of mankind's soul. It is a mark of great penance and shame to fight against the Imperium's enemies divested of such protection. Sororitas power armour and sabbat pattern helms are blessed with holy oils and fastidiously maintained. The armour frequently bears the fleur-de-lis, symbol of the Adepta Sororitas, as well as the stylized symbol representing the Adeptus Ministorum and the wings of the Imperial Aquila. Alongside their more lethal equipment, each sister carries a chaplet ecclesiasticus. This takes the form of a string of adamantine beads, upon which hangs one of the icons of the ecclesiarchy. The beads represent acts of humble penitence undertaken by the bearer. In the case of long-serving sisters, a single bead may represent 10, 100, or even 1,000 such acts. Many other symbols, relics, and sacred artifacts adorn the Battle Sisters' war gear. Purity seals layered with oaths waft in the draughts of smoky incense. Text from revered hymnals is inscribed into the sculpted ceramite of armour, and upon the flanks of engines of war. Simulacra of long-dead saints, or even their mortal remains, are carried to war, the heroines' names emblazoned across vibrant banners. Such signs of devotion go hand in hand with the sisters' exultant prayers upon the battlefield, their songs of praise rising above the din of war. Notable members of the Adepta Sororitas: Ephrael Stern and Kaiganel of the Bloody Tears, a disgusting Xenos. Stern has fought insurrectionists, mutants, abominations of the warp, and Xenos monstrosities beyond count in defence of the Imperial Creed. Her skill at arms is beyond question, though accusations of heretical powers manifesting in her presence have led her and her Aeldari comrade Kaiganil to an existence as nomadic outcast warriors. Stern was once a seraphim of the Order of our Martyred Lady, though she has since been known by many other epithets. Thriceborn, the Demonifuge, Sainted Saviour, and Heretical Witch have all been used either in laudatory praise or hate-filled condemnation. No records of her existence remain in the sanctuary in which she once trained and prayed. If any survive, then they may be inside the Order's fortress shrine, within the convent sanctorum, or perhaps in the private archives of certain high-ranking inquisitors. That such individuals are concerned with her deeds is a reflection of the suspicion in which Stern is now held, but it was not always thus. It was on Parnis, during an expedition to recover the fate of a lost Ordo Pronatus, that Stern was slain in battle against the minions of a greater demon of Slanesh. This loathsome demon had physically ensnared the 700 sisters of the Lost Order and forged them into a single flesh prison formed of their bodies. The creature's followers called the unholy creation the Screaming Cage, for the sisters who formed it suffered endless agonies. Yet while the Screaming Cage tormented their conjoined bodies and magnified their pain, the damned sisters were also fused in mental and spiritual might, united in their faith. Stern's selfless attack gave the entities of the Screaming Cage their chance. Seizing the opportunity, they poured their spiritual strength into Stern's fallen form. In a blaze of righteous power, Stern was propelled back to life as a tremendously potent and gifted champion against the servants of chaos. Since that day, Stern has had to battle not only the worshippers of the Dark Gods, but also those of her own Imperium, who believe her to be irrevocably tainted. Though they might find their fuel in faith, Stern's powers manifest themselves in a supernatural fashion that many have mistaken for, or chosen to condemn as, witchery. She is stronger and faster than any of her sisters, unleashing searing bolts of holy judgment upon her foes, and, when death has claimed her, she has returned to life each time. In this era of proliferating psychic mutation and heresy, such supernatural occurrences are more than enough to render Stern a target for more than one zealot. Nor is she helped by the company she keeps. Bound together by the strands of fate, she travels with an Aeldari known as Kaiganil, or simply the Pariah. Once this warrior was a harlequin of the Laughing God. Now he is a wanderer, an outcast from his own people, who has found his place at Stern's side. Kaiganil has brought Stern by the dark paths to the repository of forbidden lore known as the Black Library, and it is through him that Stern has made contact with the Ynnari, though none but she yet know the true purpose in this. Celestine, the living saint. Sculpted wings spread wide, halo blazing, an ardent blade in hand. Saint Celestine is an embodiment of the God Emperor's might. She shines like a star amid the smoke and fumes of the battlefield, radiating holy light. The faithful are filled with strength and courage by her presence, even as heretics recoil in terror. Those who flee are wise to do so, for Celestine strikes like the Emperor's own judgment, smiting the unrighteous with a strength that belies her human form. With a gesture, the Holy Saint calls fires of retribution down from on high, or infuses her sick and injured allies with healing energies. Of her life before she was declared a living saint, very little is known of Celestine, other than that she was a sister repentia of the Order of our Martyred Lady. She was but one warrior amongst those who fell in war against the heretics of the Palatine Schism. But after her body had been cleansed of the blood and filth of battle, she rose once more, standing flawless before the faithful in attendance. The remainder of the Palatine Crusade passed in a bloody whirlwind of vengeance, as Celestine was hailed as the Crusade's figurehead. The entire sector being scoured of not just the schismatics, but every being the Crusaders deemed unworthy of existing upon the worlds of man. Lord Ansgar, the Crusade's leader, believed the Holy War would reach its conclusion at the capital world of Palatine Sector, but Celestine insisted upon first liberating a small backwater world named Sanctus Lees. Unknown to all but her, the world was home to the ancient shrine of the Fiery Heart, once visited by St. Catherine. Celestine ordered a broken altar moved aside and the flagstones beneath it taken up, uncovering the entrance to a hidden crypt. Barring any from following her, she descended dusty steps that none had trodden for millennia. As first light broke above the ruined shrine, Celestine rose from the tomb, borne aloft on a column of divine radiance and attended by cherubs and doves. She was now clad in a suit of shining golden armour, and wielded a blade wreathed in sweet-scented petals, its blade so bright none could bear look upon it. She gazed around, and all who dared meet her eyes were struck down by equal parts heavenly adoration and infernal terror. After her apotheosis, Lord Ansgar and the conclave of his Thorian compatriots declared Celestine a living saint. Her presence invested the faithful with an unprecedented fervour, and hundreds of thousands of heretics met a fiery end at the hands of her armies. Many were fearful in her presence, for to stand before her was to submit to the judgment of one whose example could never be emulated. Celestine has fought the faithless over long centuries, and in all corners of the Imperium. Many times it has appeared that she has been struck down in battle, but wherever she falls, she inevitably rises once more like the radiant dawn. The Gemini Superior often fight at her side. Each of these champions is possessed of a portion of Celestine's grace, and would lay down their lives to protect her. It is difficult to predict where Celestine and her Gemini Superior will appear, but wherever they go, the Emperor's will is made manifest. Morven Val, Abbess Sanctorum of the Adepta Sororitas. Spiritual and military leadership of the Adepta Sororitas is vested in Morven Val, the recently elevated Abbess Sanctorum. By her uncompromising command is the might of the Order's militant unleashed to scour worlds clean with the fire of her aggressive piety. Val does not direct such crusades from afar, but plunges into battle at the forefront of the fight. Morven Val issues her directives in clipped and severe tones, her young features always set in an expression of stern resolve. Her strident devotion to the God Emperor and the defence of the Imperium is beyond question, and she is the beacon to which the entire sisterhood looks as their spiritual and martial exemplar. Val is a warrior first and foremost. She is a superlative frontline commander and expert combatant. However, she must be more than just this, for a galaxy-spanning force awaits her every order, and the guardianship of the faith of mankind is in her hands. These are heavy burdens to bear. Rather than a mark of honour, the heirs of St. Dominica consider the position of abbess to be the highest of duties and responsibilities, one to be borne with stoicism, rigid devotion, and humble acceptance. The former abbess's ship was declared lost en route from Ophelia 7 to Holy Terror during the anarchic cataclysm when the Great Rift split the Imperium. News of this dire loss was achingly slow to reach the wider Adepta Sororitas, for amidst such galactic unrest every order and far-flung mission was on its own, maintaining their isolated devotion in the face of encroaching madness. Only as the darkness began to recede was the terrible loss uncovered. The need for an icon of leadership was greater than ever before, and the ecclesiarchy appealed to the convent sanctorum and priories to submit their candidate for abbess. Amongst those considered, Val was by far the youngest. She was an aggressive and selfless Celestian superior of the Order of the Argent Shroud, whose dedication in the face of monstrous onslaughts had earned her the approval of her sombre order. The complex factions within the ecclesiarchal palace on Terra believed that so young and politically inexperienced a sister might be more easily manoeuvred. Her expected naivete would be a gateway for the ecclesiarchy to exert more influence into the sister's operations and internal hierarchies than convention dictated. What many with the ecclesiarch's ear wanted was a ceremonial and malleable figurehead. What they got was a forthright and iron-willed warrior. Val was on campaign in the rest-scarred purgation when the ecclesiarchy's delegation arrived. The priests delivered the Ministerum's declaration with ostentatious ceremony and layered ritual. Scarred and blood-stained, her silver armour chipped and fire-blackened, Celestian Superior Val listened in absolute silence and without emotion to the elaborate ceremony of appointment, couched in terms of mere invitation. She then stunned the congregated bishops, prelates and hierarchs and confessors by quietly requesting a period of prayer on the matter. Val entered her mission shrine to Saint Sylvana and undertook a solitary meditation for 3 days, while increasingly nervous priests paced anxiously. When she emerged, she seemed to those present to walk taller, her eyes hard and unreadable to the clergy, some of whom involuntarily backed away from her. With a handful of words, Val accepted the appointment. She commended a successor to her canoness before turning on her heel and striding swiftly for the priest's orbital transfer ship. Having planned many days of worship and ceremony to mark the appointment, the gathered priests were aghast, only a handful had the presence of mind to hasten in her wake. In the months after her arrival upon Holy Terra, Val soon proved herself a dreaded opponent to those who sought to control her. She continued to wear full battle armor when receiving senior members of the Holy Synod, intimidating and unnerving them with her pitiless stare and brusque responses. Val threw herself into re-establishing personal contact with as many orders as possible, firmly deflecting any priests who tried to assure her the matters were already in hand. She sought to satisfy the orders that the Abbess Sanctorum once more stood as their commander, absorbing data on their current crusades, demanding field reports and strategic dispositions, and ascertaining what they were doing to throw back the flood of impious savagery that boiled out of the Great Rift. It can be expected that Val, young as she was and propelled so suddenly to the rarefied heights of power, must have wrestled with questions of faith and self-confidence. Yet whatever struggles took place behind the doors of her mind remained private. Not once did the new Abbess Sanctorum allow even a crack to show in the armour of her faith. It did become clear, however, that Val chafed at the reins of what she saw as personal inaction, when so many other Sisters of Battle were fighting and dying. Even when, upon the recommendation of Rebute Gilliman, Val was elevated to the status of High Lord of Terror, it did little to cool her ardour for battle. Few within the Adepta Sororitas were surprised when the Abbess declared herself the commander of the Ecclesiarch's crusade against the treacherous trade worlds of the Philosopher's Belt. Since then, she has taken to the field in person dozens of times during her short tenure, leading forces of every Order Majoris. Not given to rousing sermons and uplifting oratory, Abbess Val instead leads by example on the battlefield, letting her deeds in service to the God Emperor speak for her. Numerous senior sisters from several orders Dialogus and Famulus complement Val's command staff, deftly dealing with the slew of generals, planetary governors, admirals, and more that daily clamour for her attention. Val does not see herself as the Emperor's chosen, but as an instrument of defence who must place herself between the Imperial Creed and the countless horrors that seek to defile it. Her sense of duty to this lofty position means she will never recklessly submit herself to an unwinnable war. Martyrdom, as her former order taught, is a release from one's duty and not its ultimate expression. As all her predecessors understood, the position of Abbess Sanctorum is a burden that can be set aside only when the last heretic, mutant, Xenos, and demon is expunged from existence. Only then might she step back into anonymity as a sister of her order. Editor's note. It's very surprising that someone who holds such high station and is even a High Lord of Terror has the time to fight on the front line. But what do I know? We are where we are. When the Abbess Sanctorum leads an army of the Adepta Sororitas, she takes up the weapons and armour kept reverently aside for her personal use. Few throughout the millennia have borne these sacred relics to war, and none as often as Val. The ancient Paragon warsuit, Purgator Marabilis, is the most powerful and finely crafted of its kind. The Fabricator General of Mars in M37 poured the resources of his own forge temples for 2 centuries into its restoration before gifting it to the Adepta Sororitas for their salvation of the fallen forge world of Garn Quora. Its holy spirit responds only to the most pious and battle-hardened of the Emperor's servants. The suit's pilot launches righteous volleys of deadly missiles from the shoulder guards inscribed with verses from the Fide Imperialis, while the underslung heavy bolter, Fidalis, pronounces its lethal sentence upon scores of faithless heretics. The embossed gun shield marked with the names of the 2 convents over which the abbess has authority, is said to shine with the Emperor's own light, throwing back the hateful spite of unbelievers and twisted monstrosities. From the reliquaries of the Imperial Palace, the golden custodians of the Emperor presented Val with the Lance of Illumination. Only the Adeptus Custodes know its true legacy and import. It is said that a day even darker than those which blight the Imperium now will need the Lance's enlightenment. If the Adeptus Custodes shared such terrible knowledge with the abbess, the notoriously taciturn Val has kept it to herself. The following is a good example of one of the thousands of war zones and battlefronts that the Sisters of Battle are currently actively engaged in. War Zone Varentia. Among its endless wars, the Imperium fights over worlds, either rich in resources or whose position shields others against barbarous threats. For the Adeptus Ministorum, the greatest resource is faith, and their battles are fought for the purity of mankind's soul. Worlds like Varentis too, a vital wellspring of labour and soldiers, must be kept pure at all cost, lest corruption spread. It was local clergy of the cult Imperialis that first raised the alarm of impending heresy in the Varentia system. Throughout the equatorial city-states of the capital world of Varentis II, the insurrection began small, with minor disturbances, inter-faction disputes and dangerous claims of variant doctrinal interpretation. Concentrated in the huge cities, each spreading for hundreds of miles, the disruption threatened the valuable flow of minerals extracted from nomadic mining settlements far to the north, whose transuranic ores were the treasure of the local Uberig subsector. Malcontents and thugs were brutally quashed by the Adeptus Arbites and reserve defence militia, yet no sooner had one protest turned riot been crushed than 3 more would spring up in other cities, seemingly unconnected. The ruling heptarchy deployed the planet's centralised defence forces whilst simultaneously dispatching hired guns and privately owned troops against their rivals. The dedicated Ministorum priests, however, had detected a connective undercurrent of apostasy. They preached vigilance against unknown clan miners from the north, who appeared alongside each new shipment of minerals before seemingly disappearing into the city's underbellies. While matters degenerated, the senior bishops of the Cathedrum Marabilis made contact with the Order of Our Martyred Lady. The cathedrum was the seat of Uberig's bishopric, a towering and ostentatious edifice whose foundations had been laid in honour of a fallen saint of the order, Carnaline. The Order of Our Martyred Lady responded with haste from their nearest sanctuary, yet the fickle tides of the warp beat against the sisters' ships as they made their perilous journey. By the time it translated back to real space on the edge of the system, recalibrated chronometers registered more than a year had elapsed on the embattled planet. The Order's assortment of requisitioned mass transports, donated freighters, and converted barks deployed in an orbital blockade and beheld the equatorial belt in the grip of all-out war. Their hails were answered only by static-laced screams, unholy chants, and oaths to a true pantheon. 4 commanderies of the Order of Our Martyred Lady were unleashed in a swarm of dropships and landers. Canoness Preceptor Morelli delivered her sermon from the transport bay of the Arvus Lighter Divinitatis, preaching a fiery oratory of retribution and vengeance. As the transports tore through the atmosphere like blazing comets, a dedicated clarion craft broadcast deafening hymnals of praise. Converted Aquila landers soared over the smoking cities, dousing them in sacred oils that ignited on contact with the air. Blessed aquaseeders churned up the roiling clouds with archaeochemical impregnation, so that a holy rain fell and blessed the tainted streets before the sisters even set foot upon the planet. Allied tech adepts of Mars overrode the foul broadcasts of the civilian Vox network, so that each emitter around the planet blared with rapturous choirs. Such was Morelli's initial strategy, to overawe the traitors with the supreme majesty of the God Emperor's power, breaking their morale while inciting any loyal survivors to righteous hatred. In the city-state of Forstadt, Morelli's second-in-command, Canoness Yavis Lowe, dispatched dozens of angelic seraphim and zephyrin squads to break through the clouds of smoke from on high. At the northern trade terminus of Geberan, Palatine Theria discovered the truth to the priest's suspicions. Her mission of sisters destroyed hidden caches of arms and battled mutated clan miners being delivered into the heart of Geberan's trading district. They had clearly hoped to lose themselves in the chaos of civil war, as the Heptarchy aimed to keep their profits flowing. In the capital, Verendha, the Cathedron Marabilis was no longer a shining beacon of faith. Once gilded battlements were riven with iron spikes, and upon each was impaled the mutilated body of a Ministorum priest. Enormous octahedral sigils proclaim the holy site now as a fane for the Chaos Gods, and impious graffiti labelled the Emperor false idol. This abominable sacrilege drew the majority of Canoness Morelli's forces. Swift phalanxes of rhinos and immolators tore along Varenthar's rubble-strewn streets, disgorging squads of battle sisters that speared straight for the cathedral. Coral barrages of explosive missiles from the Canoness's second wave tore open the rude barricades and defensive lines the cultists had erected. Mutated spawn and godless cultists whose bodies were given over to demonic possession poured out of the cathedral's adjoining chapel bastions. Most were held at bay by ferocious firepower, brought down with volleys of explosive bolts and sheets of flamer before they reached the sisters' lines. Yet several rampaging monstrosities breached the cordon, wreaking carnage amongst the battle sisters' ranks. Those sisters who perished accepted their blessed martyrdom with serenity, continuing to fight to the end, with screamed prayers on their lips, rather than give ground. Their sacrifice gave their comrades time to redress their firing lines and purge the unclean monsters from their midst. Canoness Morelli led a counterattack that pierced the cultists' western flank, leading her warriors in shouted prayer toward the cathedral's lower entrances. From the bowels of its crypts there suddenly arose an answering chorus. From the catacombs came Verentus II's Bishop Praetor Inigo Revellon, leading a starving but fierce-eyed civilian militia bearing bloodied, improvised weapons. Having continued their guerrilla war beneath the city for months, Revellon had heard the battle psalms and swiftly brought war to the cultists' rear. Scores of the priest's militia were cut down in moments, as the cultists turned upon them with wild fury, but the bishop's attack had achieved its purpose and split their attention. Between Morelli's steadfast battle sisters and the suicidal militia of Revellon, the remaining heretics defiling the cathedral were torn apart. Morelli reconsecrated the Cathedron Marabilis, using it as a command headquarters to retake first Verendha, and after 3 more weeks, the remaining city-states. The Heptarchy suffered at her hand once the world was retaken, for they had failed in their duty. The bodies of each of their dynasties lined the major transitways of the city-states in stasis-sealed moments of agony. Purges continued for more than a year, under the oversight of Bishop Praetor Revellon. By ecclesiastical decree approved by the High Lords, he brought Varentia under the direct rule of the ecclesiarchy, rededicating the capital planet Varentis II as a shrine world in the name of those who had fallen in its defense. Ave Imperator. The Emperor protects. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. A lot of new additional information, I think, for the Sisters of Battle, stuff that we didn't know before, and yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've got something out of it. I know I have. If you want more information on Gog Van Dyer and the Age of Apostasy and various other events in the early stages of the creation of the ecclesiarchy, basically, there's a comment in the there's a link in the comments section. I'll pin it there. So head over to there for the history of the entire Imperial Church. This video obviously is concentrating specifically on the Sisters of Battle and where they are today. That video is more of an overarching view of the Imperial religion, belief in the Emperor, Gog Van Dyer, obviously, all that stuff, basically. So that's a nice follow-on if you've never watched it and you want to watch some more stuff about this. And there's another little one, I'll link that as well, which is drawn from a novel, which I'm assuming is like, if you want to say canon, let's say canon, because it's all canon, unless it isn't. But that also delves into one of the founders of the ecclesiarchy. I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway. Please do give the video a like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, do leave me a comment, and do hype this video if you can. All of these things massively help me. I'm trying to rebuild the channel after the recent issues I've had, and it's going well. I really appreciate everybody who has been liking and commenting and hyping. You've done me a massive favour, and I cannot help but say thank you enough. The more you give me back, the more you give me, the more I can give you. Okay? That's how it works. It's a quid pro quo. Is that right? I don't know. I don't speak Latin. All right. I'm going to go. The one thing I will say is, I don't like that this Morven Vale, this new character they've created, is a High Lord of Terror as well. And then she's off on campaign and you can use her as a model in the art. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit weird. But then again, I guess, you can use Gilliman now and the Lion. And it's like, well, they're Primarchs, they're demigods as well. You'd think they'd have better things to do than, like, fighting a random battle against Orks, I guess. It's all, I mean, the lore and the tabletop, it's a constant friction with reality. Anyway, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. Again, hope you've enjoyed this. And again, do those things. It massively helps me out. And I'll be back again, hopefully next week, with even more stuff. Bye-bye. Ta-ra. Have a good week. May the Emperor protect.